Hello, everyone, and welcome to this KSI interview on the hidden epidemic, the mental health of secondary school students. My name is Joey, and I will be your host for today's interview. I'm one of the youth leads here at KSI, which is an independent think tank based in Kuala Lumpur. Today, we will be assessing the effects of Malaysia's public education system on the mental health of secondary school students. I am incredibly honored to introduce and welcome our speaker for today, Dr. Stephen Jambunathan. Dr. Stephen is a clinical psychologist who completed both his Master of Medicine and fellowship at the University of Malaya, followed by his expert training at the University of Melbourne. He's also the medical director of the Mind Faculty, a mental health clinic based in Kuala Lumpur, and he is especially interested in the development and mental health of adolescents. Thank you so much for being here with us today, Dr. Stephen. How are you doing?
Good, and how are you?
I'm good, thank you.
My pleasure.
Good to hear that you're doing well, and we really appreciate you speaking with us today. And I'm so excited to hear some of your insights on this area of mental health. So let's jump straight into it. There's been a decline of mental health in Malaysia, which has been taking place even before the pandemic, especially among children and teenagers. To start us off, Doctor, could you tell us about some of the main mental health issues that Malaysian secondary students struggle with today?
Before the pandemic was just a gradual increase in stress and expectations. There was clearly an increase in the amount of anxiety and depressive conditions among teenagers. And then later on with the pandemic, it has skyrocketed incredibly, sadly, not just adolescents. In the clinic and in other clinics, we're also beginning to see children who are not coping because of school pressures of having to deal with online studies, and the rates of suicidal attempts are increasing, behavioral problems are increasing. So it's not looking good.
Yeah, thank you for giving us that context to today's interview, Dr. Stephen. And I think it was especially interesting to hear about children coming to clinics as well and seeing that increase in mental health issues. And following on from that, let's talk about the link between Malaysia's national education system and the mental health of secondary school students. Now, Doctor, in your opinion, how has the structure and conduct of public schools in Malaysia affected the mental health of its students?
Surprisingly, I would say that from my clinical experiences over this recent 2 years, the schools are actually, the public schools actually are coping very well. Of course, there have been these odd cases here and there, only because exams have been postponed, and kids have been breaking down because they study to a peak where they want to perform, and then exams get postponed, and eventually they get exhausted and they give up. But from my experience, I've noted that the internet communication between teachers and the students on the public school healthcare has been interestingly good.
Right. It's so interesting to know your point on how public schools actually were doing so well, before the pandemic. And, it's all these changes that come about that students have had to deal with extra pressure. And like you said, the exhaustion of not knowing when their exams are happening. And, just exploring what you said a little further, I think that there has been an emphasis on academic performance of secondary school students. And this is a culture that has almost been ingrained, in Malaysia. And there's been quite a lot of discourse on how this emphasis on academics can affect the mental health of students. But, to turn that around today, could you maybe tell us how mental health issues affect the performance of secondary school students instead?
Wow, that's a tough one because it's rather complex. If you're talking about the post onset of pandemic, uh, just being online, studying without student interaction, without human contact, lots of students have fallen off the bandwagon for more than two reasons. At least one being the system has not really gotten used to online studying. Kids just get blasted with stuff and deadlines. And interestingly, um, adolescents who have managed, despite having conditions like attention deficit hyperactivity disorder and attention deficit disorder, those who were coping now can't cope because you don't have that phoning effect of people being around you, people working together with you. Yeah, that's I believe one of the main reasons why the system does not seem to be working out too well for our adolescents and our kids too.
Thank you for those insights, Doctor. The key takeaway that I got from them is human contact and, how important it is to stimulate that environment of learning and encourage students as well. And moving on to the next question, mental health among adolescents is something that you're particularly interested in, Doctor. So I was wondering if you could tell us about the state of mental health literacy and help-seeking attitudes among Malaysian youths. So in particular, those in public secondary schools.
Okay, apart from the fact that unfortunately uh, more adolescents are in the public schools also, more adolescents are having the need to see a psychiatrist or a psychologist. Um, on the flip side, the good thing is that they are open to coming to see somebody for help, and the parents are now beginning to see that yes, uh, psychological or mental health conditions need to be addressed. Unfortunately, due to a cost, there is a benefit of people becoming more aware now.
Right. Yeah, I think it's so important to take note of what you said about that change in culture that's coming about of parents being more aware of, their student, children's mental health needs. And, with that cost, unfortunately, that's how the awareness comes about. And just to follow up on that question, could you talk to us about the effectiveness of national mental health literacy campaigns, such as the recent Let's Talk Mindasihat campaign, in combating mental health issues among the youth?
Oh, I think that's a fantastic move that's really helping the whole nation, the regions, and occurring worldwide to help society realize that even children, even adolescents need help. And we need even more support. We need more support and we need even more facilities available for people to come for help. Malaysia is doing really well, but we can do much better with more support.
All right. And just to build upon that question, I hope you don't mind, Dr. Stephen. What sort of resources do you think we'll need to improve these mental health literacy campaigns?
Apart from increasing the awareness, unfortunately, what we lack is the financial backing. Because the Ministry of Health is doing a great job with, with making available psychological and psychiatric assistance available in all hospitals throughout the nation. But it's getting overloaded. The waiting list is getting longer. And on the private sector, I have been on the government side for, wow, 30 years, more than 25 years. And now on the government sector, now being on the private sector, even there, the waiting list now on my side is about 2 to 3 weeks. So we need more support because it's a slow snowballing effect. Kids who are doing really well in school, in the elite schools, have failed their trial exams, have not sat for some exams. So, yeah, what we need is more push and more availability of government and private care help for people who need this kind of assistance.
Yeah, I think that point on availability is such a great takeaway. As much as these services are available financially, we need to be able to get them to the students that need them, to the families that need them as well. I think this is something that not just policymakers, but people on the ground can also consider in creating that environment and culture where we encourage talk about mental health.
Yep,
Mm.
correct.
Yeah. And if you don't mind, we're going to be shifting gears a little bit, and we're going to be talking about possible solutions to this issue, starting off with a public-private partnership. And there are two parts to this question. The first one being, has there ever been a partnership between private mental health clinics like the Mind faculty and the government in addressing this issue? And following that, what are some goals that you think such a partnership should work towards?
Joey, that's a fantastic question, and that's exactly what we want. We have been trying, but on both sides, because of systems overload, clients overload, it's just not gelled. Unlike many other countries in the European side, even in Australia, where there's a strong cooperation between the private sector and the government sector, it's just there's just not enough time, not enough resources, and not enough people. For example, for me to leave the Mind faculty and go back to my alma mater, University of Malaya, to see some clients, some adolescents, wow, I would be standing up 10 to 15 patients on the other side, 10 to 15 clients on the other side who are also waiting to see me or to see a specialist. So it's just overwhelming because both the government and the private sector need more support. And we are unable to start working together because we just are keeping ourselves afloat. I have been in talks with the head of department of the psychiatric department of University of Malaya, where I was serving previously also. And we have spoken about it many a time, but we've not been able to make that link or make the contact, although we all see eye to eye because of the workload.
I see. And if we were to say that enough resources were given and the workload was manageable, what are some goals that you would like such a partnership to meet? Is there anything specific you have in mind in terms of expanding mental health literacy and aid throughout Malaysia?
Exactly, yes. Expanding the awareness and knowledge of the needs are very important. But another very important key role to be played would be by the general practitioners, the primary health caregivers, to be also made more aware of the needs of children and adolescents and how they cope with their studies and all that, etc., etc. Because they are the first line. Some studies have shown that up to 70% of people who are depressed only present with physical symptoms in primary health care. That would mean in the GP setting or in the clinic kesihatan. And that's a lot. 70% do not complain of feeling depressed or anxious. Just physical pain here, pain there, can't focus, can't sleep. And I think a key thing that the government and the private sector can do is to further get involved the primary health caregivers, the general practitioners. They are our first line of defense.
Thank you so much for that, Doctor. Yeah, definitely get in touch with what you said. The first line of contact, the primary GPs, will make such a difference in expanding mental health aid across the country. And we've talked a lot about the resources and how we need the financial backing as well as the workforce in order to make this possible. But I was wondering if you think there's a cultural barrier to children and families accessing mental health care. Is there sort of a stigma in Malaysia regarding mental health that's preventing people from accessing it, or is this not an issue really?
Joey, about 20 years ago, and then 10 years ago, and now in 2021, there has been a drastic improvement. Parents are becoming more aware, more open, and seeking psychological help has become less of a taboo, which is very encouraging. Unfortunately, the need is arising because of the increased awareness, but the services are still struggling. On a personal note, I've had to extend my clinics from going home at 4, 5 o'clock to going home at 7, 8 o'clock. Only because clients are coming, children are coming, adolescents are coming, and they're asking for help. And on the government side, their waiting list is just too long. So yes, the awareness is improving, the taboo-ness is decreasing, but the availability of services is just, we are struggling. We are all struggling, but I believe we are moving in the right direction.
That's very encouraging to hear, Dr. Stephen, that Malaysia is progressing and, being more accepting of mental health aid and talking about it more. And, it really sounds like the healthcare system is stretched very thin, in regards to trying to provide these sorts of aids. And maybe if we can move it back to the context of, public schools, from a clinical psychiatrist perspective, what are some changes in Malaysia's education system that you think would improve the mental health of secondary school students?
What comes to mind, firstly, would be for teachers to be educated more about the psychological conditions that students may have. Talking about adolescents, like I mentioned, attention issues, learning disabilities, mood disorders, anxiety disorders, rather than being punitive to assess them or to send them for psychological assessment. I believe that government schools do not have an in-house psychologist or if I'm not mistaken, in most cases, not even an in-house counselor to speak to these kids rather than to punish them or to send them to detention, create more resentment, create more oppositional behavior. And lots of adolescents end up, if I may say, cutting their nose to spite their face, rebelling against authority, only because the authority doesn't understand they're not bad, they just have a problem. So yes, what I believe is that in the government education system, we should have in-house counselors for students to walk in whenever they want to and see somebody, just to talk and to link the bridge between the students and the parents and the professionals who may be able to help in any other way.
Wow, yeah, I think it's so important, to take note of what you said, having that immediate point of contact in school and being able to talk to someone who's a professional about these issues. And building upon what you said about discipline and kind of that fear of culture that is cultivated in these schools, how students tend to rebel out of spite. Do you have any suggestions on how disciplinary measures in schools can be improved in public schools? Because from my knowledge, caning is still a thing, and I know that that's one of the things that really creates that atmosphere of fear in schools.
Well, it's easy for me to say, and it's hard for teachers to apply, but they've got to be educated about the alternatives of not punishing a student. And it comes back to us having more counselors available, because otherwise, how far can teachers be stretched? How far can students be stretched? So what we need is to emphasize on, let's have more counselors, let's have more psychological education for the teachers, for the parents, more forums, such as what we're doing now, more avenues, more awareness about where they can go to look for help before it becomes a bit more irreversible.
Definitely, yeah. I really agree with getting those conversations started, making sure that it's not just up to the students to seek help when they need it, but for the parents and teachers to also be able to recognize when the students need help as well. But going back to students themselves, and I think, like you said, awareness is so important, and teaching them about mental health and different ways to cope is vital in this fight against the mental health epidemic. If there were to be a national syllabus, let's say for example, maybe it's introduced as a supplementary subject to students about mental health, when do you think is a good time for students to learn about their mental health, and what do you think could be included in this syllabus in the national education system?
Oh, that's a fantastic suggestion. I've been thinking about that also. It should be not a supplementary or optional thing. It should become not really compulsory, but more than optional for students to be educated about how people their age suffer from different kinds of conditions, how they suffer in silence. Yes, perhaps something to be introduced in the syllabus is nothing you need to score about, nothing you need to pass or fail about, but something that you need to be made aware about. An hour a week, half an hour a week, just to talk about mental health issues. And I would think that, a secondary school would be a good starting point for the students, but for teachers, I would think even from the very beginning of primary school and even kindergarten, that's where they see the hyperactive kids, or they see the over anxious kids, or the kids with dyslexia. And the current system where despite failing, you can go all the way up to 15 years old, if I'm not mistaken, and then bang, crash, you lose it all. Early screening would be very important, and regular optional assessments or counseling would also help a lot. So I would target 12 and above would be a good time to start.
Thank you for that, Dr. Stephen. I especially liked what you said about mental health screenings and how you talked about students with perhaps learning disabilities or impediments like this dyslexia, like ADHD. And kind of following on that, I was wondering, how is Malaysia doing with recognizing these sorts of symptoms in students, and how well is our education system prepared to sort of cater to these students and aid them in their learning?
Um, I have noticed in my clinical experience that on the private education system, the awareness and the necessity of this kind of help uh, is uh, is improving tremendously. However, on the government educational system, perhaps because I'm now on the non-government service side, I've not noticed an encouraging surge of clients coming for help. Perhaps because they do go to the government service facility, or perhaps because the awareness is not adequate enough yet.
Yeah, I see, I see. And like I said previously, it all comes down to awareness, and the fact that we keep coming back to this point highlights just how important it is. And following up on on that, what are some recommendations that you would give to policymakers to address underlying mental health issues for in youths particularly?
Um, uh, Julie, like you mentioned, a review of the syllabus. It's not just achieving 5 A's, 10 A's, or 12 A's, but a review of the syllabus of having a totally separate area where the kids can cry or the kids can talk about problems, where the kids can go and just hang out with supervised professionals to talk about stuff. Uh, we we should we should, in my opinion, shift away from just achieving goals, but also achieving happiness, achieving a good psychological balance. And um, what would be really good is if we introduce a component of psychological or mental health syllabus in all schools across the nation, be it government and on the private side.
That is an excellent recommendation, Dr. Stephen, and I completely agree. I think growing up, I didn't have that much of you know, education on mental health, and I feel like a lot of it was self taught, and I believe that introducing that will make a world of a difference. To students and their consideration of mental health. So that holistic approach really is what Malaysia should be gearing towards. And just picking up on what you said about how the goal shouldn't be just to, get your grades and achieve like straight A's. Recently the government has gotten rid of the UPSI exam, which students take in Standard 6. Do you think that, that's going to make a difference in the mental health of students? And do you think that there should be some more considerations as to how these exams are being conducted, just all papers, no coursework necessarily? What are your thoughts, Doctor?
Oh, that's a tough one. Um, in my time, it was in Standard 5, and now it's in Standard 6, I believe, the UPSR. It's really difficult to say, Joey, because we need to screen without these what you call milestone exams. We need to also have exams exams should not be terminal, but exams can also be screening tools for kids who do poorly to find out why they do so. Like I mentioned, you don't want them to be some adolescents with learning disabilities or with challenges go all the way up to at the age of 15 and then flunk. When if they were tested, little simple tests even earlier at UPSR, where it can serve as a screening tool, not as a tool to distinguish you deserve to go up or you don't deserve to go up. So exams can be used as a screening tool for psychological assessment also, rather than to just make them a repeat exam. Or you go down to class C or D or E because you didn't do well. And secondary school is messed up because here I am, can't read. No one knows I can't read. I don't know I can't read or I can't remember. And I'm in class Form 1 in class D. And it's not my fault. It's our fault for not detecting these young poor kids early enough to know that they have special needs.
Yeah, wow. It's so interesting to see exams in that light. Exams is a mental health screening tool, something that I definitely hadn't considered. And now that you brought it up, really can be such an important tool, an effective tool as well, to help students with their learning. And so I was wondering, Dr. Stephen, in your clinical experience, has there ever been cases of students with poor mental health because of the way that they're being taught in school? So personally, I've never been to a public school, but my cousins have, and I have friends who do, and a lot of them talk about how they're being spoken at, and kind of like the teachers can sometimes read off the whiteboard instead of having that interactive kind of teaching. So has there ever been a situation where the teaching method has affected a student's morale or mental health?
Not to generalize, because I believe that the education system is picking up and improving. Teachers are becoming more psychological minded. But yes, scarring has occurred. On a personal, to share a personal experience, in primary school, I had certain experiences that even now at the older age of 50 plus, I still look back with resentment about how some teachers treated me. Of course, I very, very grateful about how most teachers treated me. Now, I was not diagnosed, but until a much later age of having also a component of ADHD. And I'll declare that without embarrassment. And looking back and how I was punished, how I was treated by some teachers in some ages of primary school, and I still hold it deep in my heart, a bit of a grudge. Hence, I do believe that teachers should be educated from a very much earlier stage of education. And I stand as an example, self-confessed, still not happy about a few experiences I had in school.
Wow, thank you for sharing that with us, Dr. Stephen. And your primary school is, well, such a formative time, or of a person's life, and the fact that that is an experience that you carry with you today, I think just highlights how important it is, as you said, for teachers to be educated and to be aware of the needs of their students in terms of their mental health. And we're coming close to the end of our interview. And this has been such a wonderful conversation. I've learned so much already from this discussion. And Dr. Stephen, if there were to be three key takeaways from this discussion in terms of what we can do as citizens, or what the government can do, what are those three key takeaways that you would like to give to us?
I would think emphasis on the PTA, Parents and Teachers Association. Lots of children and adolescents that I see who eventually are diagnosed having ADD or learning disabilities or mood problems are brought to our attention because the teachers give feedback to the parents. The child is not giving up homework. The child is not paying attention. The child is being disruptive. So number one, I would say further emphasis on the PTA, the Parents Teachers Organization. Number two, I would say a review of, I don't have the authority to say the syllabus, but a review in the sense of adding mental health awareness in the syllabus of at least the teens to be aware. And finally, thirdly, I would say that on a nationwide way to make family members, especially parents, more aware of the psychological needs of children.
Thank you, Dr. Chee. And I think, and what a great way to end the interview with 3 key points. Emphasis on PTA, so the Parent Teacher Association, reviewing the education syllabus, and considering the addition of mental health, and as well as awareness on the ground, making sure that parents are aware of the psychological needs of their children to help with kind of like their personal growth and how they're doing in school. And before we say our goodbyes, Dr. Stephen, maybe you could tell us what is the best way that our viewers can contact you or the Mind faculty for professional help in improving their mental health?
I can be contacted via Google search on the Mind faculty, or at a telephone number of 6203-0733, which is the clinic number. Otherwise, I could be just contacted also via my email, which I believe you have, which is Jambunathan@gmail.com. And I'll be happy to get advice or give service to anybody who makes contact with me.
Okay, that was perfect. Thank you so much, Doctor. And we'll be including that number as well as the emails alongside this interview. And additionally, if you would like to know more about KSI's initiatives surrounding mental health, please do check us out on our social media platforms as well as on our website at www.kasi.asia. So that's www.kasi.asia. And thank you once again, Dr. Stephen, for being here with us and for such an enriching conversation. Thank you for your sincerity and your insight, and as well, and in addition to that, the work that you do in improving the state of mental health in Malaysia. It's been such a pleasure speaking to you. And yeah, like I said, I've learned so much from this conversation.
Likewise. Thank you, Joey. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. And thank you as well to our viewers for joining us. And I hope you have a great day ahead.